he rests. Which is why we do the same. Now, the story of creation is actually very, very important to us in understanding our own world and how God designed it. You might have noticed time and time again, God is using a particular word to describe his creation as he's going along. Good. It's good. And at the end he called it very good. Why? Because this is not being written for people who are filled with a world with good. Right? We look around our world and we see a lot of things that aren't good. In fact, we don't have to look very far in our world to find things that are just downright bad. And we know it. We know it. All we have to do is just look around or just check the news on our smartphone or something, and we just there it is, bad again, bad again, bad again. And it's this constant barrage. And not only do we see it outside of ourselves, but we see it in our own hearts. We look inside of ourselves and we find bad. And so it's this reality that we are faced with. And here we have the story of something that is so completely different. God gives us the story of how God made it good, so that we could love it, so that we could fall in love with what is good, so that we could strive for what is good, so that we can have a reasonable alternative to the status quo in this world. But the key for us is to know why it's good. What is it about this creation that is so good? Well, actually, I think the days of the order of creation actually helps us to see what he's up to. So here, I've got the first 3 days of creation. Right? So we have light, sea, and sky, and land, and vegetation. And you can see, this is sort of like a very logical kind of thing, right? God is doing things in a very logical order. Yeah, one thing leads to the next, right? But then we get to day 4. And remember, we kind of like, day 4, interesting. Yeah, we've got sun and moon in there. But notice where I put it. We've cycled back up to the top now. Notice how sun and moon is related very closely to the fact that God created light. So if God didn't create light, let's just say God chose not to create light, but then he's like, I'll have a sun and a moon. What good is a sun if there's no light? Right? There's just no purpose for the sun if there's no light. Okay? Same thing with the moon, same thing with the stars, right? It just, what's the point? If there's no light, it doesn't do anything. But then again, if you're thinking about the sun and about how we get light, we got light shining in our windows. Where does it come from? It comes from the sun. So the sun produces the light, but it needed God to create the light in order for it to produce it. Do you see the relationship here? There's actually a dependent relationship between light and the sun. Well, God created the sea and the sky to be filled with fish and birds. Here again we see God creating the home, the setting for these creatures, and then the creatures that would depend upon it. Ever take a fish out of water? What happens? They need that water. So God created the water for them to live in, so that it could be their home, and they depend upon each other. And finally, in the land and vegetation, there now exists animals and humans. Ever try to live under the water for too long? It doesn't work. We're land animals. We need the land. What else do we need? We need to eat. God creates it, and it all works together. Everything kind of needs everything else. And as you look into the picture, you start to see something that's much bigger than just 6 days of creation. You start to see how God weaves it all into one great big tapestry. And all of it fits together in such a way that every part needs every other part. And these things are all related to one another. And you've seen this in times, right? When there'll be like something in nature, some sort of catastrophe in nature, some new bug or plant or something is introduced to a certain ecosystem, and it happens way over here in a corner. And then, years and years and years later, they say, well, this thing over here was affected by that thing that happened over there. Well, how did that happen? It's because everything in this creation is interconnected. Because all of creation works that way. It needs the other parts. And when I talk about this, I like to call it interdependency. Every part needs every other part in this great big web in order for it to work. Think about it. Very little in this world, actually I would say nothing in this world is independent. Everything needs something else. Everything is relying on every other part in order for it to function. Isn't that fascinating? So if God creates all of this world to be interdependent, how do you suppose he would want his humans to be? It's time for little agape sticks. So this is one of my favorite pictures in agape sticks, and if you are not familiar with agape sticks, it's pretty simple. The arrow equals love, which is also commitment, and wherever that arrow points, there is benefit. So here we have God, and his arrows are always pointed to us. That's the way it always works. And this is sort of an ideal world. Their arrows all point back to God. You can see that. In thanks and praise to God, they thank him for the way in which he made them. Now look at the rest of the arrows. It paints a really beautiful picture. Every one of those people were created by God to contribute something to everyone else. And all of those other people were created by God to contribute something back to that one person. And it works that way for everyone. Because God creates us all to be different. And he makes us different for a reason. Not because he just likes variety. God likes it. God created us so that we would need each other. None of us are independent. Which, by the way, is one of the greatest values in America. None of us are independent. We need each other. I don't have everything that I need to live. I don't have everything I need to be your pastor, for let alone. I don't have everything that I need to do my job or anything. I rely on everyone else. And I have something to contribute as well. Well, the same thing goes for all of you. Every one of you have things to contribute. Every one of you have needs that you need to be met by other people. And if you start thinking about the great big system, all the people on this planet, think of what would happen if all of us simply contributed to others and loved and benefited others. Can you just imagine for a moment what that would be like? Would there be any poor people? Would there? No. Because anybody who had more than what they would need would just simply give it. Would there be war? No, there wouldn't be war. What is there to fight over? What is there to want that you don't already have? Because everyone is simply giving and contributing. Think of all of the terrible things that happen in our world. None of them would happen if we could simply live in the beautiful interdependency that God created us to have. I fully believe that this is the design that God has for us all. And that sin has slowly eroded it. So when you put the arrows a different way for each one of these people, when the arrow comes back to themselves, instead of loving others, when we love ourselves, look at how empty that picture becomes. Isn't that kind of sad? Like we had this beautiful picture of everyone loving each other and caring for each other. Now each person's in it for themselves. I don't really care about these other people. I got what I need. I don't need anything from you, and I'm not going to give anything to you. Now, which picture describes our world more accurately? Unfortunately, I believe this one does. And I think this is a huge part of what happened when we see Adam and Eve eating that fruit. When they ate from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they were simply saying to God, we got this. We'll take this on ourselves. We don't need you. We don't trust you because we think you're keeping this whole knowledge of good and evil thing to yourself. So we got this. How well did that work for them? And what happened is it started to spread its way through a beautiful interdependent paradise and just started destroying things little by little. Because what happens in one part affects all of the others. So I believe that God's intent for this entire world is for there to be interdependency. And I even would say that it's his mission, that God's mission throughout the rest of the story, everything you're going to be reading from here on out, that the rest of the story is about God restoring his interdependent paradise. And he does it through his people. Time and time again, we see him encouraging this kind of life among his people, giving them different tools and gifts in order to do it in the midst of a really, really broken world. That there might be a microcosm of people who get it, who live that truth in the midst of the crazy and messed up world. And that's why he sent Jesus. He sent Jesus into this world so that there might be someone who will bring for us an interdependent paradise. You see, the problem that we run into and why we don't actually do this love thing is it's a heart problem. We're so taken by our love of ourselves that we needed Jesus to come into this world to show us what selfless love was all about. Someone who is God, who is willing to die for us and give us something that we don't deserve, which is the forgiveness of all of our sins. Something that we can never earn. Favor from God. And a new kind of life. And that new kind of life is the life of interdependency. That is what we are as the church. We are the microcosm of God's creation, albeit imperfect, here and now. That we love one another in this way. That we care for one another in this way. And that we look forward to the day when Jesus is going to come back and he will make it this way again. And it will be perfect and it will be beautiful. But in the meantime, we are called upon by God to take the gift that we've been given, the gift of forgiveness through the blood of Jesus Christ, and to join together again with what is good, with the beauty of God's creation, and to live live our lives for the sake of others, that they might see an interdependent paradise.